Hello, this is Aram Hamparian. I'm the Executive Director of the Armenian National Committee of America. Trying something new today. We're going live from my personal ANCA, actually my personal Aram Hamparian page, not the ANCA page. We don't have that feature available to us just yet, but from my personal page I can speak live to whoever might be listening. Not sure how many. All of you who are listening, thank you. Want to go over a few things today. The first is that within the next 10 days, we have two important congressional letters that we want to see sent with a lot of congressional support. The first is called the Royce-Sherman Letter, and it's initiated by the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House, Ed Royce, and Brad Sherman, who's a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee on the minority side. So Ed Royce is a Republican, Brad Sherman is a Democrat, but they've come together in a bipartisan effort to encourage President Obama when he sees Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev in Washington on December 31st, to impress upon President Aliyev that he must accept the Royce-Angle peace proposals for Nagorno Karabakh. These are very simple, common sense peace proposals. They stipulate that all the parties should withdraw snipers, withdraw heavy arms, and not introduce new arms to the line of contact. That's number one. Number two, it requires that the parties add observers, allow observers from the OSCE, more observers from the OSCE to monitor the region. And third, it calls for all parties to support the deployment of gunfire locator systems. It's a relatively high-tech, but also relatively inexpensive solution that would allow monitors placed along the front line to determine where the shooting is coming from. It's our view that the party that's doing the shooting will obviously have some reservations about the deployment of these devices, but the side that's not doing the shooting, we believe that's Armenia and Artsakh, would welcome these. And guess what? The proof is there. Armenia and Artsakh have welcomed the deployment of these gunfire locator systems. Azerbaijan has objected. What does that tell you? We think President Obama needs to press Aliyev on more observers, less snipers, no snipers in fact, and the deployment of these gunfire locator systems. That's what the Royce-Sherman Letter is about. We'd like to see as many members of Congress, Democrats, Republicans, North, South, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, South, to sign this letter so that a powerful message goes to President Obama, and that he in turn delivers that powerful message to President Aliyev when he's in Washington. He's coming to Washington for the Nuclear Power Summit, which is the last days of March and the first day of April. That's the first letter we want. There's a second letter, and that was initiated by two other very good friends of peace and the Armenian community. And they are Congressman Dold of Illinois and Congressman Pallone of New Jersey. They are together the co-chairs of the Congressional Caucus on Armenian Issues. They have initiated a letter that is not being sent to President Obama. In fact, it's being sent to their House colleagues, their colleagues in the House Appropriations Committee who write the foreign aid bill. And there are many provisions in the foreign aid bill that hold great meaning for us as Armenians. At the top of that list is preserving, in fact, expanding the U.S. aid program to Nagorno Karabakh. The United States is the only country that provides direct aid to Nagorno Karabakh. We think that is materially helpful, but also morally very significant, in that it identifies Artsakh as a thing apart from Azerbaijan. That's a very healthy message to send, frankly, to Azerbaijan, also to all the citizens of the region. But that aid is under threat. That aid has done great things over the years. It's provided for maternal health care. It has provided clean water for families, and it has demined the internal farmland of Nagorno Karabakh so that kids and farmers and others aren't injured by mines, unexploded mines, or unexploded ordnance. In fact, Karabakh has a higher rate of per capita injuries from this type of explosive, the mines and unexploded ordnance, than even a country like Afghanistan. So the foreign aid bill has that provision, increasing aid to Karabakh, and a whole range of others. I'll get into those in just a second, but I just want to say this, that these are sort of the two very urgent priorities before us: having strong support for the Royce-Sherman Letter and having strong support for the Dold-Pallone Letter. One is for peace, and the other is for assistance especially assistance to Nagorno Karabakh, also Armenia, also other things, but certainly for Nagorno Karabakh. You can very, very simply, with really just a few clicks, send a letter to your members of Congress urging them to sign both of these appeals. And the way to do that is to go to www.anca.org/action. I'll say that one more time. www.anca.org/action. That will allow you to support both of these initiatives, right? All the details will be front-loaded. You will simply need to support it and sign it and ship it off, and your members will get that message from you. In addition to those, there are other messages as well. And I realize I've already taken about 6 minutes, and that's pretty long in internet years, but I do want to go a little bit deeper for those of you who are interested in more detail. The letter tracks or reflects a fly-in, an advocacy campaign that we're having in Washington on March 15th and 16th. Next week, the middle of next week, we're having Armenians from across the country come to Washington. They'll be supporting our issues, but grouped into three general baskets. The first basket is peace. The second basket is prosperity, and the third basket is justice. The first two issues I talked about are certainly part of these, but I'll just start from the very beginning and run through again what these issues are. In the peace basket, at the top of the list is the Royce-Sherman Letter. Again, that's no snipers, more observers, and the deployment of gunfire locators. We think a letter to President Obama pushing him to encourage Aliyev on this issue would be a very, very healthy thing. We want to see strong bipartisan support for that effort. I'm going to scroll down here on my screen to a few points here. You can, if you want just to dig deeper into that particular issue, go to a website that we set up called anca.org/AliyevDC, ALIYEV-DC, and that will dig deeper into this particular campaign, into the Royce-Sherman campaign. You can learn more about it, and I think what you'll see you will certainly support. If you want a broader view of what we're doing on Karabakh, just overall, we've prepared, I think, it's a 16-page report that sort of goes from A to Z on everything that we do for Karabakh, the aid program, Section 907, the Bryson nomination, all that. You can look that up at anca.org/Artsakh advocacy, and that's a kind of a deep dive into our Artsakh advocacy. That's a part of our peace advocacy. There's another part that's very important to us, which is that Armenia sadly has as its eastern neighbor a nation ruled by a dictator, Ilham Aliyev. He is both guilty of repression domestically and aggression regionally. And we see those two as very closely tied together. One reflects and ultimately reinforces the other. We would like to see a more democratic, a more just, a more tolerant and pluralist Azerbaijan, one that does not tolerate its leaders demonizing entire ethnic groups. The type of rhetoric we have seen from Ilham Aliyev, in which he says, my enemies are the Armenians of the world. That type of broad brush ethnic demonization has literally not been seen in the European context since World War II. It's that toxic and not that venomous. So a member of Congress, a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Chris Smith, has introduced legislation called the Azerbaijan Democracy Act. The Azerbaijan Democracy Act calls for sanctions against Azerbaijan, travel sanctions, economic sanctions, aid sanctions, very serious pressure upon Baku until they back off on civil society, until they stop repressing citizens for the free exercise of their rights, until they stop jailing journalists. And we think that progress on that front would also bring about some progress on the regional front, that a relaxation of domestic repression would, we think and we hope, lead to a backing off on the regional aggression. So that's a second aspect of our peace agenda. So first we have the Royce-Sherman Letter, which is, to bring about peace in Karabakh. Then we'd like to see a more democratic Azerbaijan. A third aspect is peace, but in a more regional context, which is legislation called HConRes 75, introduced by, I'm proud to say, an Armenian American, Anna Eshut, Congresswoman from Northern California, and her Republican counterpart, Congressman Fortenberry, both very principled believers in religious freedom, and they have introduced legislation to say that the White House, in making a determination of genocide regarding the destruction of minorities in the Middle East, should include Christians in that determination. For us, this is an absolute no-brainer. The Christians, among others, have been targeted specifically based on their faith. That meets the definition of the Genocide Convention. Any determination of genocide by the Obama White House should include Christians. And we're happy to say that this legislation, it's a sad reality, but we're gratified that the legislation does in fact reflect the reality that Armenians are among those being victimized in the Middle East. This was passed by the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We hope it will be passed by the full House soon. The White House on its own has a March 17th deadline to make a determination on this issue. So we're now less than 10 days away from that. We hope that the pressure increases. There's been considerable press on the subject. We have joined many coalition partners, including the Knights of Columbus in defense of Christians, people from the far left and people from the far right in terms of sort of faith-based organizations. You have James Dobson and Perkins and the rest of the folks who tend to be on the more conservative side, a lot of others who tend to be on the more liberal side. This is a great common ground issue. We've been very gratified to see the faith-based community come together, and especially those of Christian faith really show some tremendous solidarity on this issue. So that covers our sort of the three aspects of peace, right? The Royce-Sherman Letter, the Azerbaijan Democracy Act, and then the determination of genocide. In terms of prosperity, I want to start by saying a couple of things, or one general point, one primary point, which is that over the past several years, as aid numbers have declined overall, we have placed our greatest focus on trade. We see a transition from a US-Armenia aid-based relationship to a trade-based relationship, and we think that's a healthy thing. It doesn't mean, though, that aid is not important. There are many, many issues on the foreign aid agenda that mean a great deal to us and that are the focus of tremendous effort. And the Dold-Pallone Letter is one example. The Dold-Pallone Letter outlines a number of our key priorities. Like I said, the first one is preserving the aid to Karabakh. We'd like to see that aid number stay at least at $5 million. There's some great work going on in terms of demining being implemented by the Halo Trust, which is a wonderful organization. We'd like to see that continue to completion. Other programs that need funding include the Lady Cox Rehabilitation Center in Stepanakert. It was founded by Baroness Cox in the years after the Karabakh War. It has been sustained through international donors and the help of the Karabakh government. They provide services to over 1,000 kids and adults a year. People born with disabilities, people who have developed disabilities, people who have been injured either in war or in work or in some other capacity. The only place in this entire region that can provide high quality care for them is this clinic, but it's underfunded, understaffed. It needs an upgrade in terms of facilities and equipment and operational its entire operations. So we'd like to see U.S. support help this rehabilitation clinic grow and meet the needs of this region, and not just Armenia, not just Karabakh, and any of the people from this region who need this care. This center will provide that care, and it's truly a blessing and one that deserves the support of the U.S. government. That's number one priority. Another priority is military aid to Azerbaijan. You have to ask yourself, how is it possible that Azerbaijan, a nation with a sovereign wealth fund in the tens of billions of dollars, is asking for millions of dollars in military aid from the U.S.? We think that's ridiculous. They neither need it, nor do they neither need it nor deserve. They neither need nor deserve this assistance. It should be zeroed out. The U.S. government, the American taxpayer, should not provide $1 for the Azerbaijani military for as long as they are threatening and acting out, committing cross-border violations against Armenia and Artsakh. So that's a red line for us. We like to see the aid to Armenia increased from the mid-20s to $40 million. There's still a lot of work, that can be done and that should be done. A lot of work in terms of technical reforms, in terms of fostering the environment for greater Armenian integration into the global economy. That is also a very high priority for us. Moving again outside of Armenia to the sort of the regional challenges, especially what's going on in Syria. We know that Armenia has accepted now over 17,000 people fleeing the violence in Syria. That's more than the United States, more than many countries. Armenia has, however, though, Armenia has received vastly less per capita in aid than almost any other country that has received refugees, and that includes Jordan, Egypt, Turkey, and others. Armenia has been, by the per capita standard, vastly underfunded. We like to see at least $10 million from the foreign aid bill to help Armenia transition refugees from Syria. That is a compassionate act. It is an act that will help bring Armenians home to their homeland. And also from a European or American perspective, every person who is settled in Armenia is one less person who will seek access or permission to come to the United States, North America, or Europe. So we think it's a win-win, and it's $10 million. We think that would be very, very well spent. Moving down the list, in terms of the U.S. aid program to Georgia, we look at the Javakh region of Georgia as one that's been underfunded in terms of the U.S. and international aid to Georgia. We like to see that corrected by a quota or a guideline of at least 10% of U.S. aid that is allocated or appropriated for Georgia to be spent in Javakh. We think that's, again, a win-win. The development of that region is going to be good for the Armenians who live there, but also good for the Georgian society as a whole. I think that we do see the Republic of Georgia needing to address regional challenges, and the way to address those challenges very often is through resources. And if the Armenians there feel as though that there's a future and that there is economic opportunity and jobs, we think that would bring stability to the region and increase the level of trust and reduce the level of tension within Georgia. A couple other things on the aid front. We like to see Section 907. You may recall Section 907. It's a law passed by Congress, signed by the president, that restricts aid to Azerbaijan because they blockade and commit acts of aggression against Armenian Karabakh. President Bush, George W. Bush, was given the authority to waive that law, and President Obama and President Bush both have waived that law. We think a lot has changed since that waiver authority was given. Azerbaijan has gone off the rails. They are marching toward war. They are growing their arsenal at a rapid pace. Their attacks are much more frequent and much more deadly. We think that Section 907 should be strengthened, and that we should not be providing aid to Azerbaijan again, as long as they're of any sort, to the government of Azerbaijan, as long as they're committing these acts of aggression, threatening a new war, demonizing Armenians, inciting hatred within their own society. A final thought on the foreign aid front is we encourage the appropriators to push for Nagorno Karabakh's return to the Nagorno Karabakh peace process, the OSCE Minsk Group peace process. It is beyond reason, beyond any moral justification that third parties could be determining the fate of Nagorno Karabakh without Nagorno Karabakh being at the table. We would not accept that for our country or in our own lives, and the people of Karabakh are right to reject their exclusion, and we are in 100% solidarity with the people of Artsakh on this issue. They belong at the table, in fact, more than anyone else. Before any other party, and certainly the international media, before any other party should sit down at any discussions regarding Nagorno Karabakh, first at the table should be Nagorno Karabakh. It's their destiny, it's their future, it's their families, their kids whose lives are at stake. So that's a very, very important priority for us. So that's the aid front. There's a whole range of aid issues. The aid to Karabakh program is the most urgent of these, but there's a whole range of them. But we balance those against trade. Trade, we think, is the long-term future. We don't see Armenia receiving aid 10, 20, 30 years from now. That's not Armenia's destiny. Armenia is always had a great trading history, great history in business and commerce. So we think that's where to make the major investment. We were very gratified last year that the United States and Armenia signed a trade and investment framework agreement that creates a platform for the discussion of trade issues. How do we grow trade and investment? How do we remove obstacles to commerce? That took us about 10 years to get. We're very happy about that. Ambassador Heffern played a great role in that progress. So we saw that happen last year. We were very pleased. We also saw the largest ever U.S. investment in Armenia last year. It's called the Vorotan hydroelectric power plant. It was a $180 million deal with another promise of about $70 million of actual improvements and capital investments. Biggest ever U.S. investments, very encouraging. But we see that agreement and that deal as the first of many. And we also see an obstacle to the future growth of US-Armenia commercial relations being the threat of double taxation. Do you know that the last time there was any document signed that even remotely addresses the issue of US-Armenia taxation was signed in 1973 under the administrations of Leonid Brezhnev and Richard Nixon. That agreement was signed between the US and the Soviet Union, two countries that were enemies. And it was a very weak amendment then. It was insufficient to even that relationship. The relationship today, obviously, between the U.S. and Armenia is night and day difference than between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. That is an old treaty. It's obsolete as a matter of sort of legal technicality. Armenia itself doesn't even recognize the validity of that treaty, saying that we didn't sign it. That's a very valid point. So here we have the United States saying we have a treaty and it's enough. It's sufficient. And then we have Armenia saying the treaty doesn't exist. We never signed it. That's obviously not the basis for clear, consistent, predictable, consistent and predictable legal framework for these two countries to build upon. We need a new treaty. The good news is treaties like this can be negotiated relatively quickly. The United States has many tax treaties with smaller economies. Armenia has many tax treaties with very advanced economies. There is a model agreement that the United States uses to build these things off of, so it would not be starting from scratch. With sufficient will from the U.S. Embassy in Armenia, from the State Department, from the Department of Treasury, we know that they would have a willing partner in Armenia, because the Armenian government has publicly called for such a treaty. If the U.S. government would step up and join in partnership with the Armenian government on this issue, we think that in short order, we could have a tax treaty in place that would eliminate the threat of double taxation. Now, some would say, well, the businesses that are operating there have figured ways to work around this problem. That's not the answer. The answer is not that you can somehow rig some system to avoid, the lack of legal specificity. The message you want to send is that we take this issue seriously. We sat down, we negotiated a treaty. It serves both of our interests, and we're going to move forward in a modern, sophisticated, responsible manner. That is the message we need to send. Armenia is a country that needs options. It needs strategic options in a very difficult part of the world. America can play a great role in providing those options, giving the flexibility, allowing Armenia from time to time, as it needs to say no to others in the region. A key to that is having a solid anchor in terms of a U.S.-Armenia economic relationship. We think that there's a lot of room for progress, and it needs to start with a tax treaty. Some good news, two firms that I know very well. I'm taping this now on my iPhone, but on my iPhone, I have two apps that are some of my favorites. One is PixArt, which is like a photo editing app, and the second is Shadowmatic, which is a great game. Both of these were developed in Armenia, and in just the past week, the heads of both companies have publicly called for a U.S.-Armenia tax treaty. On top of that, other U.S. firms that are there have gone on record saying a tax treaty is needed. Those extend from Microsoft to NASDAQ to FedEx to Marriott. Every stakeholder in this equation believes there needs to be a new tax treaty. We're simply waiting on the Department of Treasury, the U.S. State Department, and the White House to get moving on this issue. So I've taken you through right now the urgent task, which is go to anca.org/action, send that note. But then moving down through the list, we went through our peace agenda, we went through our prosperity agenda. Now I just want to touch briefly in closing on a couple of justice issues, and those are the legislations, the pieces of legislation in the U.S. House and Senate. The House bill especially, it's called House Res, or HRes 154. It's called the Armenian Genocide Truth and Justice Resolution. And it is exactly that, which is, it is a resolution that says the path forward for Armenia and Turkey is not as has been advanced in Washington, as was reflected in the protocols. going around the genocide issue, seeking to bury this issue or sweep it under the rug. That's never been a sustainable future. The future is Turkey coming to terms with the Armenian genocide, ending its denial of this crime, and reckoning with its modern-day responsibilities for this unpunished act against the Armenian nation. That's what HRES 154 says. It is an important piece of legislation. When you go to anca.org/action, in addition to supporting everything else, you'll be calling upon your members of the House and Senate to support legislation dealing with the Armenian genocide. That wraps up some of the kind of like the front burner issues for us. We have these. We want you to support these two letters, the Royce-Sherman Letter and the Dold-Pallone Letter. That's like the tip of the spear. But then there are all these other issues, and they're all important. I'm glad to discuss them with you in greater detail with you at any time. You can email me at Aram, ARAM, @anca.org. Glad to interact with you on Facebook, Twitter, on Instagram, LinkedIn, and wherever else you can find us online. Very much appreciate your patience as we sort of roll out this live video feature. I hope it went well. Would love to hear your feedback, what we did right, what we did wrong. And with that, I will say thank you and sign off. Thank you.